Hi, and welcome to Far From Home with me, Mabel Nine, and your host. I'm super excited about our guest on today's episode, Dorina Lazo Gilmore-Young. She's not only a good friend, but also a fellow Redbud writer. In fact, she's the president of the Redbud Writers Guild. She's a wise and humble leader who champions diversity in publishing. And it's such an honor to have her on our podcast today. Welcome, Dorina.
This is so fun to be here with you, Mabel. Thank you for the invitation.
Let me introduce you to our viewers. Dorina Lazo Gilmore-Young is a sought-after speaker and teacher who specializes in helping people navigate grief and raising up women from diverse backgrounds to flourish in community. An award-winning author of more than 20 books, Dorina has served as a journalist, missionary, social entrepreneur, spoken word artist, and Bible study teacher. Dorina and her late husband, Ericle Gilmore, started a nonprofit organization in Haiti, today called Haiti Gospel Outreach, as well as a fair trade jewelry business called the Haitian Bead Project. A remarried widow, Dorina lives in Central California with her husband, Sean, and three daughters. And she's raising them with a love for cultures of the world. Isn't that awesome? Welcome again.
Thank you. So fun to be here.
So I want to start by talking about your background as second generation immigrant. Tell us more about that.
Yes. So I come from a multiracial family. My mom is predominantly Italian and my dad is Filipino, although he's also a mix of Chinese and Polynesian, a little bit of Indian in there as well. And my parents, came together with this biracial marriage. Both of them have parents who immigrated. So that makes me, I guess, second generation here in the US. And I think it brings together a unique experience because their cultures are different, but they both came from immigrant cultures. And it's part of the history of our family. It informs the way that we interact and also our heart for welcoming immigrants and coming alongside other immigrants here in the US, even who are new to our country.
Mm. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I want to also talk about the organization that you founded with your late husband, Eric Clay. What inspired you both to start it?
Well, I'll have to go back a little bit in our history. I actually met Eric Lee on a mission trip years ago when we were singles. And this was a mission trip to the country of Haiti. He is the grandson of pioneer missionaries, meaning his grandparents were the first Christian missionaries in the northern mountains of Haiti. And so when I met him, he was leading this trip. It was really kind of reaching out to some of the people in our young adult group at our church. And he had advertised about it that he wanted to put on a track and field camp for kids, which I was a track and field athlete. It was one of my passions. I had never thought about going to Haiti before, but when I heard about the trip, I signed up for it right away because, it hit on some of my passions. And I also was trying to get to know people at the church and have a heart for missions. So anyway, long story short, through that, developed a friendship with him and many others who were on that trip. And through that process, the following year, we actually got engaged because we had dated a little bit and we got married then in 2003. So when we got married, we knew that we were also bringing into our marriage this passion for Haiti, passion for missions. We were very much following in grandma and grandpa's footsteps. And so in the beginning, we would just travel to Haiti doing kind of short-term trips. But in 2010, when the huge earthquake happened, there have been many throughout the history of Haiti, but that was kind of the first one that put Haiti on sort of the world news watch. And there were people all over the US, especially who wanted to support the Haitians, but didn't know exactly how. And here we had an organization, a ministry that had been on the ground for, decades that his grandparents had established. And so we decided to start a nonprofit ministry initially to help provide relief to our Haitian brothers and sisters. And then from there, the nonprofit grew so that we were not just offering relief, but we were actually building up local leaders within Haiti. So it moved from a focus of relief to kind of equipping leaders in the country. And so that's kind of the inspiration for it. As with all nonprofits, sometimes the vision is the same, but the way that it manifests is different over time.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I was wondering, from your short time in Haiti, if you could share one of your favorite memories.
Well, I initially went to Haiti not knowing what to expect. And I fell in love with the children of Haiti. So that very first track and field camp that Eric Lee and I did together with there were 8 others who were on that trip as well. We spent a week in the summertime. It was hot, it was humid, but we had hundreds of kids that came for this camp. And it was such a sweet memory for me because not only were we teaching them about track and field and running, but we were also teaching them about God's word. And we used the life of Eric Little, who is a missionary and a runner. And we
Yeah.
kind of went through Eric Little's life with the kids, teaching them. So kind of like a vacation Bible school, but it was really just focused on running. And I remember getting back on the airplane at the end of that week. And as we were this tiny little airplane pulling away from the runway and seeing the kids below and the goats and all the things in the field. And I just had this sense in my heart, like, this is not my last trip. I'm going to come back. And so that's a really foundational memory for me because when I did come back, I felt like God was calling me to Haiti. I ended up quitting my job. I was a newspaper reporter at that time, a daily newspaper reporter. And I went to my editor and I just said, I really feel called to go to Haiti. And he said, he was actually the publisher. He said, I'm not going to get in the way of you and God. And I can't save your job for you, but I believe that you need to go. And so that is really what launched me, not just into Haiti, but my also connection with Eric Lee and his family that changed the course of my life.
Mm. It's wonderful to see God's fingerprints all over our journey when we look back. That's awesome. I love noticing that when, my guests tell me their stories and their journeys. And that's awesome because it just helps us appreciate God's wisdom, his providence, and his sovereignty in our lives, and to know that his plans are good.
Yes.
And I also want to talk about biblical hospitality because I know that you're passionate about that topic. So tell us why it is personal to you.
Well, I think also that goes back to the way that I was raised. Both of my parents were very passionate about hospitality. And what that looked like in our home as I was growing up is that my parents were constantly inviting people to our table. Both Filipino culture and Italian culture has a very high value for food and ministering to people through food. And so I grew up in the kitchen with my mamas and my grandmas and my aunties, making all of the food for both sides of the family, the cultures. But then my parents really were so good at inviting people from our community and from our church who maybe didn't have other family. And a lot of times those were even immigrant families who were maybe new to the area or new to the country. And so I remember Christmas and Easter and other holidays where we would have families that would be joining us at the table. And I think they gave me that first sort of view of what biblical hospitality looked like. And
Mm.
then if we go into the Bible and Mabel, I'm a Bible teacher. I'm passionate about the
Mhm.
Bible and looking at Jesus' model. There's so many examples where God or Jesus through his ministry on earth met people at the table, whether he was feeding his disciples or whether he was feeding the 5,000, that he was preaching to. He often used that avenue of food and hospitality. And sometimes I think in American culture, we get sort of confused because we think about like beautiful table settings
Mm.
by Joanna Gaines, or we think about real fancy food. And,
Yeah.
honestly, I love those things. I do love making a special meal for people and helping them to feel loved through that. But that's not the heart of what hospitality is about. what it really is about, I think, is loving on people in their place of need. So for our family, more recently, we had some friends from Haiti who were moving here. I would call it more of a refugee kind of experience because of all of the political unrest in Haiti right now, and that it's not a safe place. And so our friend was moving his family, his wife and his two daughters. Now he has a new baby. And I realized that even though right now I can't go to Haiti because of the political situation there, that I had the opportunity to extend that biblical hospitality by helping this family. And so even helping them settle here in my city of Fresno, where I live, was a way that I could multiply hospitality that was maybe different from what I've ever done in the past. Just helping them get signed up at the local school and find a church and, taking them to Target to get toiletries. Like those are basic small things, but they add up in a big way. And I didn't realize until I started doing this with our friends how
Mm.
challenging those are for recent immigrants when you don't speak the language and you don't know where to go and you don't even know how to advocate for your children. There's all this paperwork to fill out. So that is something that I've been challenged with more recently, to think about hospitality even beyond, just feeding people.
Yeah. When we spoke about this earlier, you mentioned that resettling your refugee friends was truly a community effort. So can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm so grateful for this because our friends moved in July. And so my kids were on vacation at that time. I had a little bit of a break from my own teaching and my work because I was on a sabbatical. And so I was able to help them a lot in the beginning, like I mentioned, like signing up their kids for school and filling out paperwork for health insurance and those types of things that were hard in them coming. Now, the dad does speak English, but even walking him through things, he's been speaking English for years, but there's just so much protocol and so much red
Yeah.
tape in our culture that he needed help with. And then I was grateful because then when the school year started, there were other people in our community that he knew that were able to come alongside them. So they found a church and they have a church family, and his wife recently had a baby. And so that church family just showered them with love
Mm.
and, like a baby shower, which, normally
Yeah.
they might not have that in Haiti, but we have that in our American culture. And so they got all kinds of baby clothes and diapers and things that they needed. And then my mother-in-law, Eric Lee's mom, who has been very present with them in going to doctor's appointments
Mm.
and helping them, get to Walmart so they can buy food on a weekly basis, like different things like that. So it really was a community effort. And for me, being part of that community, it also didn't feel like a heavy burden because I
Mhm.
knew I could kind of stay in my lane with the things that I was able to help with. And I was also able to kind of just coordinate and say, oh, Pastor, can you help him with this? Or Mom, can you help them with that? And we were able to sort of divvy up the jobs that way.
Mm. It's as if everybody was able to use their gifts and resources that they were, that they had to come together to really love on this family and help them settle down. Now, I have a question for you, which is, I don't know how personal you want to get about it, but hosting a family in your house is, an act of sacrifice. And it's hard. It's not easy because you have, even if they're friends, right? Someone in your private space and surroundings all the time. So how did you and your family cope with all of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny, like bringing together two families from different cultures. There's obviously going to be things that are different and awkward. I think we were excited to do it. A little bit of context, Waki, who is the husband, he was a student at the university years ago. So he actually stayed with my husband, Eric Lee, and I when he was a college student in his 20s. So we had him live with us at that point. And then there was this sweet kind of full circle thing that happened in bringing his wife and his daughters. And I have kind of the anti personality that I want to like care for the kids, especially knew that the transition would be hard for them. They didn't know they were moving. They didn't know when they were moving. And so I wanted it to feel like, okay, well, you're landing at Auntie Dorina's house. And even though, we have some things that are different about our cultures, I know how to make Haitian food. I wanted my home to be like a nice landing spot for them, not forever. And so we had communicated, if you want to stay with us the first couple of months before you get an apartment and get settled, you're welcome to do that. They actually ended up staying less time because they were able to get settled quickly. But, some of those things, it was good for my children to remember the things that they are blessed with, to be able to share those things. I think it was also good for the girls who are from Haiti, like to practice speaking English with my daughters. We got to introduce them to some American foods. Some of that food they liked, some of it they didn't,
Yeah.
just those funny, awkward things that happen. And, when my girls were little, we were living in Haiti. So they experienced that in the reverse. And this was a couple and a family that welcomed us when we were in Haiti. We didn't live with them, but just, teaching us things about the culture and introducing us to the food and the music and all of that. So it did feel kind of full circle, but whenever you host, there's always going to be awkward things and you just have to work through that.
Yeah, yeah, that's great advice. So, what would you say to someone who's considering hosting a refugee family? Like, why, if they're on the fence, what would you say to convince them to go ahead and do it?
Yeah, I think the most powerful thing for me was watching my girls and how, my daughters are 12, 15, and 17. Seeing them be able to have that experience of welcoming someone else. And there was a language barrier. And so there, like I mentioned, there are things that maybe were not easy and figuring out kind of how to relate to each other. But what I saw in my daughters was a sense of gratitude that began to rise up in them. Even like, oh, well, we have a washer and dryer in our home. We have a dishwasher. We have these appliances that our friends were not used to. And it was kind of that thing of, first of all, teaching them how to use them, but also my kids remembering like, oh, wow, we have a dishwasher. That's amazing. Like, it's not something that we usually are thankful for. And even just sharing clothes and other things. So I think for the experience of a family, especially with kids, being able to welcome another family, it instills some values in us that are biblical values that we might not otherwise really understand with our hearts.
Mm, I love that. So now let's tap into the Bible teacher part of you and dig into scripture a little bit. What does the Bible say about hospitality?
Yeah, I think that hospitality is rooted in mercy, in God's mercy. And I did a study, I wrote a Bible study actually called Create in Me a Heart of Mercy that came out last year. So I did a deep dive into this. And as I was thinking about the concept of mercy, which is very nuanced and it includes a lot of different things, it's a consideration of God's heart for justice and compassion and his faithfulness, his love for us. But I believe that mercy is also expressed through hospitality. And
Mm,
so it's anchored in this idea that God had this great love for us. He extended hospitality by extending his son, by sending his son to
mm,
earth to be with us. And so Jesus' name, Emmanuel, it means God with us. So he is with us. And then, as we were talking about before, it's like Jesus sat at the table with people. He went to weddings. He walked places with people. He served up the bread and the wine. And he sat down by the water with his disciples after he rose from the dead. And he served up fish for them and talked to them about vision and about the future. And so we have this model of hospitality in Jesus. And what he did is he embraced the awkwardness. He stepped into places that were uncomfortable. He allowed interruptions in his ministry and, you know, He went down a side street so that he could meet a Samaritan woman at the well. He stopped in the middle of a crowd so that he could heal a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years. Over and over again, we see that his mercy is manifest through this hospitality, through inviting people to eat with him, to share their stories, and then to bring healing in their lives through those acts. So I believe it's all intertwined, mercy and hospitality, and God's heart for us then causes us to multiply that to others.
Yeah, yeah, that's so powerful. And I'm also reminded of that passage in Genesis where Abraham invites these three strangers. He asks them to stay for a meal and he tells them, stay the night. So that's going beyond even what was expected according to those cultural norms. And then Jesus uses in the New Testament the example of, we all know the story of the Good Samaritan also. Even though he did not take him in, he put him up in an inn.
Yes.
And then later went and paid for him and did all of that. So there are so many examples of hospitality in the Bible that we can find. I took a test. I think it was kind of a questionnaire to find out my spiritual gift. So hospitality was one of them. And I remember someone speaking about hospitality and saying that those who are hospitable tend not to make it about themselves, like you said earlier, right? They don't get caught up in details about whether my house is clean or I want a perfect table setting. And so usually you find people who have this gift. It's not like they don't care about having a tidy home, but they welcome people in any way. And that people who come to your home will tell you that we feel at home here, we feel welcome here. And so I'm wondering if, like, on a personal level, if that has been the case with you. Like, do people say that when they come to your home that they really feel welcome and nice? And I had once my son's friend who said he likes to come over. I don't know for what reason. And then he told his mom, this is like a nice hotel that I can go and relax.
I love it. I love it. Well, I think it goes back to the anti factor that I was talking
Yeah.
about before. I do think probably the greatest compliment that someone can give me, because I care about this deeply, is that they feel welcome in my home. And
Mm.
so, especially, we have a life group that comes over every weekend, and I host Bible studies and, our track and field team, different things like that. And so people say, "Oh, I'm going to Auntie D's house." My name is Dorina.
Oh.
So I'm called Auntie D by the kids. And I want them to feel not just well fed, that's very important to me, but also that sense of belonging, that sense of they are welcome. Like, they can put their feet up on the furniture, they have refrigerator rights, some of those types of things where
Mm.
it it might be a fancy meal, it might be paper plates, but they are welcome in our space. And so when someone can express that to me, that they feel welcome in our home, that is the greatest compliment to
Mm.
me.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
grateful for that.
Yeah, and I think also it's about giving people the space to be themselves. And I don't know how that happens, whether it's our body language or our words, but just allowing them to be themselves when they come to our home. And an instance that I can think of is that when someone told me that they're okay to speak English in my presence in my home because they don't feel judged. And she had a very she's from Japan and she was still learning the language, so she speaks slowly and I never thought of that could also be a part of a hospitality, that we make someone feel comfortable in their own skin, even
Yes.
if they speak in a different accent, or maybe they dress very differently from us, but we embrace them anyway. So, in a sense, hospitality is not about us or that we feel good about it, but that I think those who have the gift think more about the person they are hosting and how can this person feel more comfortable. And it's not about the frills and the beautification of your home, even. It's about more creating a space, a welcoming space. But again, I also want to put a disclaimer to that, that yes, certain people do have the gift, but then we are all called to hospitality on a certain level. It's not just reserved for some. We're all called to do that. So my last question to you is about your new book, Kailani's Gift. So share a little bit about your book and what inspired you to write it, and why is it so dear to you?
Yes, so this is a book for kids, and it's such a it's a fun story because I actually wrote this book more than 10 years ago. My first book, my first children's book that was fiction that came out was called Cora Cooks Ponset. And since we've been talking about food and hospitality, it's about a Filipino American girl who's learning to make this traditional food dish. And I wrote this Kailani's Gift as sort of a follow up to that book, but now we changed the name and it's so much later. God brought a publisher for this book. It's really a story about a girl who is learning this traditional dance called the Tininkling, and she's not good at it. And she's the youngest of all these siblings, and her siblings are amazing dancers. And she's kind of like, I want to learn, I want to learn. And then when she tries it, she's not doing that great. And her brother's making fun of her. But through the process, she's also learning this new skill, this new dance. And then towards the end of the book, I won't give away all the detail, but to say that she gets to perform the dance with her siblings at her grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary. I actually got to go to a 50th wedding anniversary for my own grandparents when I was younger. We did a dance. And so some of it comes out of my own life experience. But the heart of the message is that each one of us have gifts and talents, and we might not be great at them when we start,
Mhm.
but God can continue to develop them and we can use them to bless others. And so I
Mhm.
feel like it's a message for kids of all ages, even us as writers, to remind ourselves like, okay, we're not going to be just like sitting down at the computer and writing a masterpiece the very first time. But that does mean that God didn't give us that gift, or that he doesn't want to develop it and use it
Mhm.
for others.
Yeah, and the same thing goes for hospitality. We will get better as time goes by, and the more we practice it, the better we get at it. Great book. I just wanted to tell our viewers and listeners that I will put all the links in the show notes to go and pre-order Dorina's latest book and her other books too. So it was so great to talk with you, Dorina, about hospitality and God's love and your new book. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for inviting me to your podcast table.